Let's talk about 5 data points from this report on the changing landscape of corporate startup engagement.
So what we asked with this question was, has your startup engagement activity increased in the pandemic era, the period since March 2020? Has there been no change, that bar in the middle there, whoops, I'm pointing, or has it decreased? The interesting thing actually was that companies that were based in Europe and Asia were more likely to have increased their startup engagement activity during this stretch of time than companies in North America, who were more likely to have just been in that stable middle bar there. Okay, so the second thing we wanted to know was, why are you trying to engage with the startup ecosystem? And you can see from this chart that there are really 4 key reasons. These large companies are trying to identify products or services or technologies that plug into the existing product offering or service offering of the large company. Second is they've identified some kind of business problems, and these startups provide a solution to them. The third thing is really exploration. So this is the soft stuff. Learning about new trends or new dynamics or new technologies that maybe the startup understands better than the corporate does. And finally, the fourth big reason is to diversify into new areas of business. And so maybe to kind of stretch or grow the company beyond what it's been traditionally good at. So how do big companies define what a quality startup is? This was a question that we really wanted to understand as part of this research, because a lot of people would say, well, a quality startup is maybe they have quality venture capital firms that have invested in them. Maybe they've been through a particular accelerator program or graduated from a top university. Actually, those things you'll see show up much lower down on the list. And the top things that corporates care about when you ask them what is a quality startup is they've already built some prototypes, or they are already working with some pilot customers. And so that really gets down to the brass tacks, right? Of, is there a prototype that physically or digitally exists that we can get our hands dirty with, that we can potentially deploy in our business? Or do they have some pilot customers that they can point to? We found that these Global 1000 companies are pretty skittish when it comes to startups that are still slideware, ideas on cocktail napkins, maybe 3D models of something that they plan to build one day. And corporates really are much more comfortable when they can see some reference customers or some prototypes that already exist. This chart talks about the how. How are big organizations interacting or thinking about interacting with the startup ecosystem? Let's start with the bottom of the list here. Very few companies would say we're acquiring startups, we're conducting reverse pitches or some kind of open innovation challenge to bring in problems from the startup world. And finally, deals that would give startups some kind of access to your customer base or distribution. The thing at the top is we are monitoring or scouting or trying to learn about what's happening in the startup ecosystem. You can see that almost 100% of companies would say we do this today. And the second thing is pilot testing new technologies or tools developed by startups. So that's really where the action is. If you look at that middle blue band, you can see that companies are considering whether they should be doing some M&A or whether they should be conducting reverse pitches, but that's not really happening today by and large. This last data point is about challenges, because we always like to ask about challenges at Innovation Leader so that people can understand, what you should be prepared for going in, or what's going to require a little bit of energy and thoughtfulness to work your way through. And you can see at the top of this chart, the top 2 big challenges will not be a surprise to anybody who has worked in a big company or maybe worked with big companies from the startup perspective. Challenge number 1 is convincing people around the table, getting consensus that, this is a startup that investing in them or partnering with them is actually going to move the needle for us. Big companies often think that they are, these big blue whales or big elephants, and is this tiny little piece of plankton, this tiny little startup going to make a difference? And so making the case and convincing people is challenge number 1. And then challenge number 2 on this slide is just the impedance mismatch, the differences in operating speed between how fast the startup wants to move, how fast they need to move in terms of hitting certain milestones that their investors and their board care about, and just how fast things happen inside a big company where, getting something done in a year can sometimes be a big accomplishment. Forget about getting something done in weeks or in months.
So those are my 5 data points for you. I would love to hear any questions that you have or any comments that you have at scott@innovationleader.com. Just drop me an email. The 2 things I would mention, again, what are you trying to get from the startup ecosystem, and how are you trying to bring these ideas or these technologies into your company and benefit from them? I don't think that enough large corporates give those things enough thought in advance. They have the sense that there's a lot of energy, there's a lot of activity, there's a lot of ideas in the startup ecosystem, and they kind of want to swim in those ideas in a vague way. It's an exploration or a learning activity, and that sort of approach just doesn't deliver. After a year or 2 go by, it doesn't deliver enough concrete value to a large Global 1000 company. If you're interested in getting an excerpt of the report, you can do that at innovationleader.com. Just look in the research area of our site, or if you're already a member of innovationleader.com or a member of the Industrial Liaison Program at MIT, who we did this research with, you can get access to the full report.